Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Bruce Burke. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer of Mize Incorporated. I'll be your host for this afternoon's webinar. Before we just dive into the discussion, I'd like to introduce our panelists and bring your attention to a few details. First and foremost, if you're a social media aficionado and you want to post a question via Twitter to either Dr. Hendricks or Mr. Stevens, you may do so via Twitter or the GoToMeeting interface. Please send any questions on Twitter to the MizeCom Twitter presence. That's at MIZECOM. And please use the hashtag #SmarterEngagement. That's #SmarterEngagement. Everyone that poses a question during the event will be entered to win a copy of Doug's new book, The Retail Revival. Again, you can post questions via either Twitter or GoToMeeting. We'll have a 5 to 10-minute Q&A session after the panelists have done their initial presentations, and all attendees are muted during the presentation, and this webinar is being recorded. I'd like to introduce Dr. Phil Hendricks, Ph.D. He's the founder and director of the research consultancy firm IMMR. Dr. Hendricks is also an analyst and contributor for GigaOM Pro. IMMR specializes in helping organizations identify, verify, and capitalize on opportunities for new-to-customers or new-to-market products. Dr. Hendricks has led significant engagements with both startups and business units of Fortune 100 clients, such as AT&T, GeoIQ, Verizon, Sprint, Sony Ericsson, Company.com, American Express, UPS, Allstate, and others. Accompanying Dr. Hendricks is Mr. Doug Stevens, who is widely known as Retail Prophet. Doug is one of the world's foremost retail industrial futurists. His intellectual work and thinking have influenced many of North America's best-known retailers, agencies, and brands, including Walmart, Home Depot, Disney, Crayola, WestJet, Citibank, Razorfish, and Air Miles. Prior to founding Retail Prophet, Doug spent over 20 years in retail industry, holding senior international roles, including the leadership of one of New York City's most historic retail chains. Doug is also the author of the groundbreaking new book, The Retail Revival, Reimagining Business for the New Age of Consumerism. It's also my distinct pleasure to introduce Mr. Ashok Kardam. He's the founder and CEO of Mize Incorporated. We're a leading provider of smarter customer engagement solutions. Ashok is a successful entrepreneur with 15 years of experience as CEO of a software and high-tech companies. Ashok founded 4CS, a leading warranty and service lifecycle management company. It was acquired in 2011 by Parametric Technology Corporation, now known as PTC, which is a multi-billion-dollar public software company listed on NASDAQ. Ashok holds an advanced degree in computer science from JNTU, Hyderabad University. Both the white paper and the broadcast of this webinar will be available for download following the event. All registrants and participants will receive an email which will provide the links to access the materials. If you have questions about the event or want further information about Mize, please feel free to contact us at mize.com. Remember, we'll be scouring Twitter for your questions. Once again, please direct them to MizeCom Twitter presence and use the hashtag #SmarterEngagement, so you'll be entered to win a copy of Doug's new book. Or you can also post them via the GoToWebinar interface that we're using. At this point, I will hand the reins over to Dr. Hendricks and Associates and let them take it from here.
Thank you, Bruce. Phil Hendricks here. Welcome, everyone. Delighted to be participating on the webinar. I'd like to thank Bruce and Mize for sponsoring, and delighted to be presenting along with Doug and Ashok. We're going to be examining topics today that are really critical to businesses. Part of the focus, of course, is on loyalty and driving revenue, but an important component is understanding how mobile and social fit into that. And specifically, what we're going to try and accomplish today is to help you understand the importance of mobile and social in the context of strategies that your organizations, be you a retailer, brand, or in fact a small to medium-sized business, can use to engage consumers. So we're going to talk quite a bit about loyalty engagement. We have a strong point of view around engagement, and we'll share with you some examples of things that companies are doing that we think represent innovative practices. We'll also talk a bit about what consumers are trying to accomplish, not only independently of companies using third-party apps and the like, but increasingly collaborating with companies that are helping them throughout the process as well. We're going to introduce a framework with an acronym called PEER, and I'll go ahead and define that. That's for personalizing, enabling, enhancing, and rewarding. And a lot of the strategies that we'll discuss today fall nicely into that framework, but particularly when we look at mobile in conjunction with PEER, becomes a very, very powerful combination. And then finally, we'll conclude with discussion around some of the customer expectations that are driving this whole phenomenon, as well as some of the success factors that companies need to care for as they move through this. I do want to call your attention to several additional resources. As Bruce mentioned, Mize has sponsored a white paper that we've just released within the last week and a half that's available on SlideShare, so you can go on and download that if you haven't already. There's also another white paper that will be coming out in a couple of weeks, and I'll allude to some of the findings from that. That one's sponsored by AT&T Keyring, which is a leading loyalty app, and IHG, the international hospitality company. And again, there are lots of other examples that I think you'll find interesting in that. And as Bruce mentioned, Doug has a wonderful book that's relevant not only to retail, but indeed any brand doing business in retail and beyond. So I'd highly recommend that, and 10 of you will be lucky enough to get a copy of that. But Doug also has a blog, which is how I got acquainted with Doug within the last year and a half. And he's got some very, very provocative posts there, including the end of marketing, which is one of the ones that first caught my eye. The one that's very relevant to our discussion today on the third shelf, and I'll have Doug elaborate on some of the background there as well in just a moment. So again, welcome. Let's jump right into things and talk about loyalty. It's probably the holy grail for many businesses, clearly important for many different reasons. And there are a number of benefits and outcomes that surround it. But let's be realistic. Not many companies have many loyal customers, much less reach that pinnacle in which they're loved, revered, and so on. But I would mention a white paper, an article that was published in Journal of Marketing last year by two University of Michigan professors called The 7 Dimensions of Brand Love. That sort of triggered my thinking as I was working on the two white papers that I've just mentioned around loyalty and where it fits. And the diagram here is not really meant to depict a house of cards, but it is meant to suggest that loyalty sits on top of a number of things, excuse me, not just product and service features, which are the cornerstone, but other qualities and characteristics of companies as well, some of which are shown at the bottom here. But the point that I want to emphasize with this chart is that relatively few brands or companies achieve a significant number or following of loyal customers, despite the fact that it's probably one of the most significant, valuable assets that a company can develop and nurture over time. So this really is all about how to accomplish that, and in particular, how to use mobile more effectively and fully. So we'll intersperse some of the usual suspects like Starbucks, of course, Disney, Coca-Cola, Apple, USA, but Doug has quite a few other examples drawn from his research as well that we'll intersperse. I also want to talk briefly about what we mean by engaging consumers. So again, that's a term that's used widely. It means different things, and quite often in marketing, we sort of use it in a narrow sense as if we are trying to be engaging to a consumer, meaning get their attention, perhaps entice them and the like. But we really think of it as the gear metaphor here suggests, in a more constructive sense, trying to understand what consumers are trying to accomplish throughout their consumer journey, if you will, both pre-purchase as well as post-purchase. And as the gears imply, ideally, we're interlocking in ways that we help the consumer accomplish whatever is important to them. And this includes not only, again, learning about and perhaps purchasing our product, but as we'll see, using the product, managing it through warranty, service, and a whole host of other activities as well. And of course, social cuts through a lot of this, as we'll discuss in just a moment. But I think an important quote was shared by Howard Schultz, who's the Starbucks CEO. And this sort of sets the stage for much of our discussion. He pointed out that Starbucks, despite its success, has to find ways to be relevant to customers outside of their four walls. Now that's a pretty profound statement for a company that's essentially in the retail or service business with premises all over the world. And of course, Starbucks is doing a superb job of that, not only within their establishments but outside as well. There's probably a better graphic for this, but hopefully you'll notice the distinction between this one and the one on the previous page where the gears and teeth were interlocking. Here, if you look closely, you'll see teeth that are broken, splintered, clearly not interlocking, and in fact, quite often, as we think about businesses and consumers, the gears often aren't aligned. There are gaps, disconnects, and conflicts. And again, going back to loyalty as a measure, one of the questions that we've used over the years, really trying to gauge loyalty, because it's a pretty elusive goal, but also a pretty elusive concept to measure. Instead of merely asking satisfaction or observing persistent repurchase, we ask, how much would you miss this company or brand or product if it were no longer available to you? And that's a very, very revealing type of measure that really gets at the heart of loyalty. There are lots of symptoms of, and apologies in advance for the phrase here, EDD, engagement deficit disorder. That's actually a real term in psychology applied primarily to undergrad students, but I think it applies more broadly to companies who are thinking about ways to engage consumers. And we see lots of symptoms of the deficit in which they've really taken their eye off the ball, or indeed perhaps never had their eye on the ball. And as a consequence, we see on the left-hand side some of the outcomes that are widely discussed, including showrooming, going into retail stores and then walking out without purchasing, instead purchasing online. Churn rate, of course, returns, marketing dollars that and budgets that are quite high without really showing much of a yield, and failure rates both by new companies, products, but even individual interactions with consumers as well. On the right-hand side, and perhaps less well understood, are the consequences to consumers of this disconnect as well. So if we think about what we as consumers encounter and experiences on a day-to-day, week-to-week basis, clearly we spend a lot of time that's inefficient and perhaps not well spent. Sometimes we spend and regret. We may pay more. We may buy products, again, that prove not to be what we had expected, a whole range of things that fall under these symptoms. The one, quite frankly, that is underestimated and probably the deadliest of all is what I would call indifference. And that is customers seemingly interacting, satisfied with, but as soon as a superior alternative becomes available, you see those customers moving rapidly to the new alternative. So I wanted to tee up a question here for Doug and bring him into the discussion again, because he's done a lot of research on these topics over the last several years. Doug, why do you think so many companies fail at engaging consumers?
Well, I think, Phil, you hit the nail on the head. I think first and foremost, I think most companies start from a place where they're considering their own needs first. So, we're still coming fundamentally from a place where we're talking about, we even hear it in the language that we use in business, driving traffic. We talk about driving traffic to stores. We talk about, capturing eyeballs, So, I mean, we're using these very primitive terms when what we really mean is we want to try to develop something of value to a consumer and share that with them in an intimate way that creates some sort of level of trust, some sort of level of value. And so I think first and foremost we really have to look at the business proposition through the consumer's eyes. Just a couple of other small points too on loyalty. We're also confronted with some new realities, and it doesn't really matter what you do. I mean, we're seeing new entrants coming into markets now that prior to now had enormous barriers to entry. Witness the payment processing business with companies like Dwolla, a startup that is only a few years old and is doing $500 million in payments. Square, another example of a company that has broken into the payment industry and is giving banks and payment processors a headache. So regardless of what you do, the barriers to entry now, some of it by virtue of technology, have come down to the extent that there can be a revolving door of new entrants into the market, and all of that conspires to give consumers an unprecedented level of choice and confidence in rejecting you because they believe that a viable alternative is just around the corner. So again, all of that is really redefining our entire concept of loyalty.
Those are great points. In fact, it's a nice lead-in to the next slide, which we've termed new terms of engagement. And again, apologies for the play on words there, but as we think about engaging consumers in the old model versus new model, as Doug pointed out, there's really been a sea change brought on in part by new entrants, but also fueled by the emergence of technologies that have really shifted the balance of power. So I'll highlight just a few of these on the right-hand side that are especially important for our discussion today. But clearly with mobile, social networks, and location, as we think about how companies can identify and address consumers, it's really shifted from the old school of demographics, psychographics, to these intimate, personal, and indeed dynamic criteria that are available to us as a consequence of mobile and some of the functionality like location, as well as social networks. So the addressability of individuals is a key difference in this new paradigm. The other one, given the intimacy that's critically important, is the shift from intrusive push, if you will, to something that's more permission-based. Again, consumers have far more control today over not only what they view, but when they view it, when they have access to it, and so on. And indeed, as we'll discuss in just a few minutes, a growing number of third-party apps as well as competitors, as Doug mentioned, vying for that attention as well. And I guess the third that I would highlight here is the shift from thinking about the path to purchase, if you will, as a fairly predictable funnel-shaped phenomenon to one that's more of a journey. In fact, the best metaphor that comes to mind for me is a pinball machine in which the consumer is likely to bounce around and move back and forth and perhaps go back up into the process as they're exposed to new information, new ideas, new options, and end up, quite frankly, in a place within that process that's very difficult to predict from the outset. So again, that highlights the importance of building these enduring relationships over time so that we're not merely observing sort of random behavior a la pinballs, but instead having consumers that interact with us and hopefully remain with us on a persistent, consistent basis over time. Doug, I did want to ask you another question, just thinking about this slide. Which of these dimensions do you think companies are having the hardest time adapting to?
Well, frankly, I think that companies are really having a difficult time adapting to the whole concept of engagement, and I'll explain that. For a long time, we advertised through interruption. And we're all aware of that, whether it was television or radio or some other means. The format was essentially a matter of interrupting consumers enough times for them to notice you. As the effectiveness of advertising decreased and as the cost of advertising through conventional media increased, we began to move over to this idea of permission-based marketing and this concept of engagement. Regrettably, I find that engagement has really just become the new advertising. in a lot of cases. And I mean, you can prove that to yourself by clocking in the number of times in a given day you are asked through some means to engage with a company. So like us on Facebook, help us name our new flavor, enter our contest, text this code to this address to win. All of these requests to engage. The problem with that, I find, is that all we're doing is we're proliferating the landscape with these, basically messages which are replacing advertising messages. The problem with this is that in order to really be engaging, you have to be interesting. And that's where most companies feel, I find, are falling down fundamentally, is that they're believing that, oh, because we now have a Twitter feed, that will enable us to engage consumers, or because we've created a Facebook page, that will enable us to engage consumers. But the problem is, what engages consumers is the same thing that engaged consumers 1,000 years ago, and that was you either made something or did something that was compelling and interesting. So that's the place to start, I think, when we're talking about engagement. You have to ask yourself honestly, why would anyone want to engage with us in the first place?
Doug,
so, then we can get tactical.
That's a great lead into the next slide, in which we talk about, again, loyalty. Just to reiterate, it's really a combination of the customer benefits, as Doug has articulated so nicely there, but also the effort required. We want to take both of those into account, and you can get pretty far, as Zappos and others have illustrated, by minimizing the denominator here, the effort required. But you really have to simultaneously focus on the customer benefits as well. So that leads us to a broader and we think somewhat more constructive definition of engage that's quite a bit different from the narrow definition that Doug suggests many companies still adhere to, and that is not merely occupying, attracting, or involving a consumer, getting their attention or interest, but in addition, helping them accomplish goals by enabling, supporting, and quite often, again, that involves minimizing the effort required, but also thinking about ways to add to the numerator. In fact, when I joined a consulting firm many years ago, one of my mentors was fond of asking his clients, are you a numerator manager or a denominator manager? Do you focus on cost or benefits and other outcomes? And we can think about the same thing in the context of really serving customers, consumers as well. So again, our definition of engage and engaging is broader, and as you'll see, we think far more useful in terms of this discussion. Now again, as I mentioned, Doug had I think a profound post just with the title alone. Was it last year, Doug? In which he asked, how long could your business survive without marketing? And Doug, I think you sort of helped us understand the impetus for that post. But there was another comment made last fall that really triggered my thinking around all of these constructs. And that was by Peter Fenton at Benchmark Capital, who observed that mobile is becoming a remote control in virtually every aspect of our life. And in fact, in preparation for the seminar, I had the old conventional remote here, and Bruce Burke suggested, Phil, why don't you go ahead and show the app on the iPhone there that allows you to control your television, all the other media devices in your home from the device that is always with you as well. So I think these are both pretty profound, both questions as well as observations. And we want to share now some data with you that begins to, a couple of frameworks and data that begin to get more specific around how companies do this. One is an old notion of moments of truth, but we've tied this now to 7 steps, and you may have one that includes more steps or fewer. But as we think about what consumers do, sort of spans the circle here from browsing and then getting serious and beginning to plan purchases, shopping, buying, and then post-purchase, of course, using, getting service support as needed, and then in many categories, increasingly, reaping rewards through points or other incentives that are offered by companies. So this term moments of truth is one that we're going to refer back to, but an important aspect of it is that at every one of these 7 or fewer or more interactions that you have, there are really opportunities for you to engage with consumers. And again, those opportunities include pre-purchase, during purchase, at the point of sale, path to purchase, as well as post-sale. And as we'll see in just a moment, Mize really is designed to accompany the consumer, but also help brands and even retailers orchestrate and improve both the numerator benefits, if you will, but also reduce some of the effort required on the part of consumers as well as brands to facilitate this process. So, Doug, I did want to bring you back in with one of your other posts, again, which I thought was well phrased, and that was this notion of the third shelf. Would you comment on that and perhaps discuss its relevance here?
Sure. You know, I guess it goes back to the concept that for well, a couple thousand years anyway in retail, there's really 2 places that marketers put most of their effort. 2 shelves, as I like to think of it. One shelf was in the store, where ultimately you hoped to, quote-unquote, drive the consumer to the shelf in order to buy the product, and the other shelf was in their home, where presumably they kept the product and stored it. And so we put disproportionate effort into appealing to the consumer and trying to engage the consumer at those 2 shelves. Technology, however, has advanced to the point now where there can be a 3rd shelf. In fact, there can be a 3rd, a 4th, a 5th, and as many shelves as you like, and they can be anywhere in the world that you want them to be. And there's no reason anymore for us to adhere to this idea that we advertise to consumers and we drag them along this path to purchase, this defined path to purchase, ultimately to consummate in a purchase which becomes the end of that process. We can now, as Phil's laid out here on the circle, we could potentially create opportunities to buy the product, not just to be messaged about the product, but opportunities to actually transact at every single one of these junctions. Because as Phil also mentioned, there is no defined path to purchase anymore. I may go from buying to browsing. In other words, I may buy a product, and only after I buy it do I become interested enough in that brand to actually go back and start to research and learn more about it. So the consumer is bouncing around between all of these, and we have the technology now to put the storefront in front of them at all of these junctions.
So that raises the question of how well companies are doing, and we've got results from a survey that IMMR has done recently, and we'll highlight just a subset of these results. Additional results are available in a forthcoming report from Gig On Pro titled, "If Shopping is Broken," and by the way, the answer to that is yes, "Can mobile fix it?" And the answer to that is somewhat as well. So again, we want to be careful not to position mobile or even social as the end-all be-all, but it is a significant tool that companies, including retailers and brands, can use to enhance the overall consumer experience, build loyalty, and so on. So this survey summarizes results from a study done with smartphone owners in the U.S., and we asked consumers how happy they are shopping with retailers, both online as well as brick and mortar. And a very quick summary here. At the bottom of the page, you'll see that about 1 in 4 are very happy. Now, just so that I'm not misstating, the next step down on the scale was satisfied. And I'm not showing that because, quite frankly, we believe the bar is and must be set not merely at satisfied, but something above that, where it's whether it's delighted, very happy, or something that reflects some sort of experience that is extraordinary, not merely something that's satisfactory. Now, the other point to highlight here is the distinction between the percent very happy with Amazon, which is over 50%, versus the average for the stores shown on the bottom of the page. That's a 2-to-1 margin. Very, very significant, and again, we know, of course, how consumers are following that sentiment with their dollars as well. Just a couple of other results that I want to share with you. As part of the study, we also asked consumers to rate their experience across some 20 aspects that are summarized on this slide. Again, they span discovery, choosing, buying, and using, but detailed measures that are around the circle here. And the question here, which we're summarizing again from the white paper that I mentioned earlier, is consumers' ratings of select experiences using that same scale that I mentioned earlier. And what we see here on average is that about 1 in 4, in some cases fewer, are very happy with that aspect, whether it's keeping up with new products, comparing, selecting products, determining where products is in stock, etc. And if you look at the white space on each of those pie charts, you see that as many as 2/3, for example, keeping track of warranty and maintenance, are saying they're less than satisfied. So again, the key takeaway from this slide is that there are lots of opportunities to figure out how to improve customers' experience throughout the shopping process and journey. Just a couple of other points, and then Doug, I've got a question that I want to have you help us understand. It's important, though, to understand consumer motivations. What are they trying to accomplish? And I've intentionally shaded out the middle category here, but if we were talking with healthcare companies and perhaps others involved in fitness and the like, there's a category of shoulds where individuals are trying to do things that are good for them, but quite often fall short of. But on the right-hand side, of course, consumers generally want to maximize something we'll call wants, for lack of a better word. And then on the left-hand side, again, motivations include minimizing this friction, whether it's avoiding, minimizing, or eliminating the things at the bottom, whether it's a bad outcome, uncertainty, risk, time, cost, etc., altogether. So the framework that I want to introduce is that I've mentioned earlier is called PEER. And in essence, what it involves is using strategies and particularly technologies to learn and adapt to consumers so that we're speaking to them not as a number or part of a mass market, but instead individuals. On the left-hand side, enabling, and by and large that involves removing frictions. On the right-hand side, enhancing by surprising, delighting, creating experiences, again, that are extraordinary. And then at the bottom, reinforcing through rewards as well as other means. And I just wanted to mention a couple of examples. For instance, KLM, the airline, offering meet and seat, which allows you to pick your seat partner based on their social media profile. If that includes, is the individual going to talk during the session, I think that would be quite useful. We don't fly KLM out of Atlanta, so I haven't had occasion to use it, but it's intriguing. Neiman Marcus, that allows consumers to alert the sales associate as they enter the store that they're present, and for the sales associate to pull up that consumer's profile and obviously serve them in a much more constructive manner. Home Depot here in Atlanta, again, Lowe's, others providing in-store maps, which are necessary in the big box stores. One that I think is particularly impressive, McDonald's, QSR, providing information, for example, on the packaging that allows the consumer to know the farm from which the products were actually picked, be it potatoes for the French fries, but also the date when those potatoes were picked. I think that's pretty powerful, giving consumers more information and control that, quite frankly, they might not have asked for, but certainly enhanced their confidence and appreciation of McDonald's, if you will. Doug, you had a couple of other examples of ways in which companies are using peer strategies that distinguish them. You want to add a couple in here?
Yeah, and you know, the construct of this, Phil, is interesting, and it echoes work that was done by a guy named Kevin Maney, who wrote a book called Trade-Off a couple of years ago, and I actually referenced Kevin's book in my book. The way he put it is, you now have a marketplace where there are really only two compelling propositions that you can bring to consumers. One is, as you've pointed out, Phil, this low friction proposition, which Kevin Maney calls the super high convenience proposition, where you've taken all the friction, all of the bother out of something. And on the other side, you have this what he calls a super high fidelity experience, whereas you've put it, you're maximizing the wants and you're really maximizing the experiential nature around something. So I look at the landscape and I look at companies like Warby Parker, for example, that's getting a lot of press lately because what they've done is they've taken the optical industry, an industry that is monopolistic, filled with friction, very, very difficult and tremendously expensive, and they have essentially completely turned it on its head with a new model that involves going online, picking the type of glasses you want, seeing them virtually on your face, selecting 5 pairs, having those 5 pairs shipped to you free of charge, trying them on for real, getting a sense of what you like, sending them back free of charge, and then ordering them online, giving your prescription, and getting them in the mail for $95. Oh, and by the way, they give a pair of glasses to someone in another country who can't afford prescription glasses, all for $95. So there's an example of somebody who said that the amount of friction in this industry is insane, and we're going to use technology and leverage a lower cost model to alleviate that. And on the other side, we're also seeing companies that are creating a far greater experience. I referenced one company out of California, a very small retailer, a cycling shop, that has a process whereby you can go in and be digitally fitted for your racing bike, and no other human being on earth will have a bike just like you because it is kinetically fitted to your body, and they're leveraging technology to do that. So on both sides we have these very powerful experiences, oftentimes enabled by technology, very different, both highly valuable. Where you get pressured and where you get crushed is if you're in the middle and you're providing neither.
Those are great examples. Let's highlight the role of mobile. I'm not going to spend much time on these statistics, but I do want to use them to highlight sort of the inexorable march of technology, mobile in particular, but also related kinds of phenomena, particularly social networking, that are being facilitated by mobile. But I want to use this slide to highlight that consumers are using mobile, and in many cases, third-party apps and platforms, regardless of what your company chooses to do. So the question is, how do you take advantage of and capitalize on these dynamics as opposed to being whipsawed by them? Now, what this has also led to is consumer expectations that are rising. Consumers expect trusted business partners, and I would underscore the importance of trusted, to know a whole lot about them, not only who they are, but perhaps where they've been, where they're going, what's nearby, what they need, perhaps what they've bought, as the Neiman Marcus example suggests, and a whole range of things. So an important part of this whole strategy involves better understanding what consumers' expectations are and figuring out ways in which your business can help them accomplish those things. Here are some additional examples that are mentioned in the white paper, and again, one that I think is intriguing and perhaps illustrative of the future is what Disney's doing with My Magic. A little controversial in terms of some of the privacy and regulatory issues, but again, Disney is creating a platform as well as leveraging technology that allows guests to manage their experience more fully, enrich it in a variety of ways that, quite frankly, are both impressive, but to some, particularly regulatory folks, raise concerns whether it's too intrusive or not. But I did, in just the closing couple of minutes here before we turn it over to Ashok, wanted to highlight one other finding that I think is very important for this discussion from the Shopping is Broken white paper. In that same survey that I've mentioned before, we asked consumers for each of the 20 aspects whether they use a mobile app for that particular aspect. So, for example, to check whether stores have products in stock or to get offers and deals. And then we compared the ratings, percent very happy of those who use an app for that purpose with those who don't. And as you can see across the top, those are the percents rating very happy with the experience compared to who use a mobile app compared to those who do not use a mobile app. And as the headline shows there, mobile app users are 2 to 3 times happier across the board. So the key takeaway here is that mobile is marching forward. Brands and companies, retailers included, can get on board and help orchestrate consumers' experiences. A key part of this is leveraging what we call digital signals. This is from another white paper that I'd written a couple of years ago. But as consumers are using and interacting with digital channels, especially mobile, they're generating lots of signals that can be used, including location, but also social media and mind, to better understand who they are, where they are, what they're doing, and so on. So just to conclude before we wrap up here on our section, there's a whole set of strategies that are described in the white paper. Doug's got a plethora of examples in his book, not only on mobile, but broader strategies as well that are well worth a read. And as I mentioned earlier, we've got the other white paper coming out on mobile and loyalty. I just wanted to conclude our part of the discussion with this chart that just acknowledges that engagement really isn't about talking, it's about doing. And the question is, how do we accomplish this? Well, there are several things that are key. The moments of truth, understanding what the consumer is trying to accomplish, the design where it gets at not only the user experience but what they're trying to accomplish, and then of course personalization as well as social integration. So this is a nice segue to Ashok, who's going to talk with us further about not only the Mize platform but how companies can engage more effectively using tools like Mize.
Thank you, Dr. Hendricks and Doug. Thank you for very helpful insights. Before getting into more of the systems of engagement, I want to start today with one simple question. I think if companies start asking more, that will provide answers to save more than $100 billion annually. The one question every executive and everyone in marketing, sales, or customer surveys to ask themselves is, how can I help customers, instead of asking, how can I sell things? Since that's a simple question and obvious, you think everybody will do it. I think you two talked eloquently about some of the examples or difficulties of engaging, and also I kind of want to talk about a couple of other facts. Companies globally spend close to $500 billion, or $500 billion annually on advertising. And authors of What Sticks estimated that $112 billion is wasted in advertising in US alone. But what are they getting for that? And I think Dr. Hendricks' survey showed only 1 in 5 customers are happy with their customer experience. So companies continue to pour billions into advertising that interrupts, and in other marketing methods that customers try to avoid, instead of focusing on creating better customer engagement and experience. So there has been talk recently about engagement. I think Doug talked a lot about this. Is the new engagement metrics are number of likes on Facebook, or number of followers on Twitter, or even advertising on mobile apps, and replacing like eyeballs to the website. While these social networks are great at connecting people, these methods are still focused on like brand selling, mostly advertisement driven, and proven to be even less effective as shown by the click-through rates. So let's ask the key question again. How can we help mobile and social consumers? And the answer to that question is what we are calling smarter customer engagement. So let's look at how is it different. First, smarter customer engagement is to be customer-centric and helps them along their journey to make better decisions. Smarter customer engagement provides utility and surveys so customers can get their jobs done faster, and smarter customer engagement delivers answers and right information when the customers need it. Smarter customer engagement builds loyalty and facilitates trusted advice from friends. So to enable better customer engagement, I think Jeffrey Moore introduced the concept of systems of engagement. These systems of engagement are not just another front end on existing systems of record like ERP or CRM, but need to be redesigned and constructed with the clear focus on providing simple and more unified customer experience that's based on customer context. And these systems of engagement enable brands to use web, mobile, and social channels to add value throughout the customer lifecycle. Smarter customer engagement platform could provide the right capabilities that directly to the end customers through the mobile and other apps and the people who interface with these customers. So let's walk through a quick scenario on how customers can get easier access to products, knowledge, and services from brands and friends during either pre-sales or post-sale stages on their smart devices that they carry with them all the time. So I want to start with, as we know, 90+% of the consumers trust their friends for product information than brands. So the product sharing and recommendations from friends is a lot better way to discover products. And from that recommendation, user can instantly access all the needed product information, either from the brands or retailers. And as they try to make the decision, users can compare products and see friends' ratings and reviews. I know we have seen a lot of usage of product reviews, like on sites like Amazon. But even better is to see the ratings and reviews from the people you know. And you can also see which of your friends own similar products and ask and get their input and advice quickly. So you can add it to the products that you want buy, and then based on that intent or that context, you can receive very relevant and personalized offers that can provide a higher value in buying that product. So from there, being able to buy the product from an online or based on where you are located from a local retailer will become much easier. So again, as a customer engagement should continue after the sale is made. So we allow our customers should be able to maintain all the products they want. And based on that, when they needed support, with a single click, be able to get to any of the different support channels that are available, either via the phone, chat, or web, or the mobile phone itself. And not only that, once you bought the product, being able to buy any accessories or consumables associated with the product should be very easy for the consumer. Or being able to track all the warranties. A lot of times people don't want to do registrations because they don't see much value for them, but being able to provide the ability to track warranties, ability to buy other service programs, I think all can be facilitated. So consumer is supported both from a product discovery to decision as well as the ownership and support beyond the original sale. So as we look at from my side, we want to provide two delivery options for brands to implement smarter customer engagement. One option is through a customer-centric smart channel where customer has access to brands, retailers, and service providers easily through a free app, which is also free of any ads, to provide simplified customer experience. Other option is through a portfolio of smart blocks that brands can configure and assemble as a branded solution. Both options again leverage the same robust platform that provides simple user experience as well as customer insights. In summary, smarter customer engagement will add tremendous value for both consumers and brands. Consumers make faster and more confident decisions, which will lead to better and faster sales conversion for the brands. Consumers can get more value from the product purchase as well as the use, at the same time lowering the cost of marketing and support per customer for brands. And consumers can conveniently track all the products that they own and wanted, and now brands have ability to engage customers at all the touch points. And again, consumers have a much easier access to brands and friends for any of the aspects that we talked about, which also helps build better customer loyalty as well as advocacy on the social networks. So in summary, or in conclusion, devices are getting smart, consumers are getting smarter, and I think it is time for brands to engage these consumers in much smarter ways. And again, thank you for letting Mize be part of your smarter customer engagement journey. Please let us know how we can help. Now I will pass back to Bruce for questions.
Thank you, Ashok. I want to again thank Phil and Doug for going over the points here and lending some insight. I learn something every time I get in front of both of them, and Ashok as well. I'd like to pass along a few questions that I've received and pose them to both Phil and Doug as well as Ashok. Number one, one that came in, Phil and Doug, this one is directed to, can you talk about some specific brands and or retailers that you think are doing a better job of engaging customers today than the average brand?
Well, you know what? I mean, I'll start with one example, and then Phil, if you have others, which I'm sure you do, feel free to step in. You know, and this isn't an example that I think is going to be an epiphany for anyone necessarily, but there's an interesting sort of point in, I think, raising it. Starbucks, I think, has done a very interesting job of engaging consumers through their mobile app, and they've done it by providing something that we surprisingly forget about sometimes. And what they've provided consumers with is utility. And I know that sounds crazy because we always think we're setting out to provide something of great utility, but oftentimes when I talk to companies, I get calls from companies all the time, startups in the mobile space that are looking to create apps for consumers. And ultimately, what I find myself asking them a lot of times is, you've built something really cool, but what's the point? What's the purpose of this? Where's the utility? And Starbucks really focused on utility first in making that loyalty card digital, allowing people to track their rewards, which is fundamentally a lot easier than trying to track it using a card, and then adding a very slick payment option up front. They just created something that was highly useful. So, the idea of engaging the consumer was really a part and parcel of just giving them something, to Phil's point, that helps them solve a problem. Rather than just thinking about their selfish needs, they thought about the consumer first.
Yeah, I'll add to that with a couple of examples. One from retail. Clearly, big box stores are wonderful in terms of variety and price, but they can be bewildering, and indeed the shopping experience can be less than satisfactory. And as a consequence, I think both Home Depot, again, hometown store here, as well as Lowe's, have both done a good job of using mobile to help the customer both plan their purchase in advance of a visit to a store, as well as help them navigate the store, if you will. But then beyond that, post-purchase, really understanding more about products they've purchased, how to install them, use them, take care of them, a whole range of things. So I think on the retail side, clearly a significant need on the big box side, but a couple of companies there that are doing a great job. I think lots of examples. If you want to look for an industry that's really all over this, I would look at hospitality. And I have to be a little careful here not to disclose things that are proprietary, but you can imagine hotels, others thinking more broadly about the customer journey. So, for example, as a guest deplanes, checking in. So ordinarily the guest checks in, of course, as they walk into the premise, but imagine the guests can check in as they deplane and are leaving the airport, and imagine the whole process then that could unfold to personalize, shorten, speed up, make better that whole guest experience if we can somehow persuade the guest to engage with us, if you will. And hotel properties, restaurants, others are building value, minimizing the friction, as we've discussed, in ways that all center around mobile, but increasingly are incorporating social as well. So look for the mobile and loyalty white paper in a couple of weeks. You'll see lots of examples, many of them drawn from service industries.
Thank you, Phil. I'm going to turn to a few more questions here. First and foremost, Christina inquired, will these slides be available after the presentation? And kudos, she says, great information, one of the most effectively communicated presentations I've seen in quite some time. Christina, yes, and we will be sending out an email to everyone who registered for the event. It will have a link for downloading the white paper, downloading the slide deck, as well as downloading the entire recorded presentation. I wanted to turn to one from Steve. Steve says, Steve Steneker, hi Phil and Retail Profit, would retailers get smarter engagement with in-home product evaluations from their aisles? And I'm going to put that in context very quickly. Steve has a solution that allows you to add in an item that you may be considering purchase to your environment. You can look at it in your current environment. So maybe if you guys could get into that, the virtuality, the augmentation sort of idea.
Yeah. Well, you know, the short answer is absolutely. You know, and we're seeing more and more technology really bridging the gap for consumers in terms of assisting them in making these decisions. You know, whether they're standing in the aisle of the retailer store or whether they're sitting behind the screen of their notebook really matters not. Technology is really coming to the fore that's helping consumers do all sorts of things, whether it's visualizing the interior of their home, moving virtual pieces of furniture around the room of their house to see how it's going to fit, trying on prescription glasses, as I mentioned earlier. And in fact, there's now technology even that, you know, because one of the things about e-commerce has always been the pushback of retailers to say, what about the touchy-feely stuff? You know, there's still things that consumers are going to want to feel. I was just watching a presentation just the other day. A professor from MIT is working on a program called haptography, where they take haptics, the technology of touch or the science of touch, and they're actually creating technology that can replicate the feel of things from behind your computer. So to Steve's point, yeah, absolutely. Any technology that we can introduce that has utility and can help consumers either visualize or tactilize the things that they want to buy is brilliant.
Thank you, Doug. Thank you. I wanted to jump right in. We're running low on time, so I wanted to make this short and to the point. Another question from Terry Hawkins. In discussing engagement with customer at key moments of truth, you do not address the opportunity after the product sale for add-on sales such as accessories, replacement, and consumable parts, service agreements, etc. Were you unable to identify a potential for such opportunities, or is it not considered in your study?
The latter. Clearly there's a potential, a need. Quite often that's a significant revenue source, but also a significant problem and a source of irritation for consumers as they run out of perishables, consumables, and the like as well. So it simply didn't make the list of 20 that we examined, but it would certainly be in some categories, PCs and others where the perishables are so critical, important. So again, depending on your industry, that's certainly one that would make the short list as well.
Okay. And one other question, or I guess a two-part question here from Terry. In your conclusions and recommendations, you indicate that fewer than 1 in 5 customers are happy with the experience. That was surprising. Do you believe what do you believe to be the primary problem? The products, the sales process, or the after-sale user experience?
You know, it's interesting. I think by and large, depending on the category, it can be any one of those. But I think for most consumers, the retail experience is by and large merely satisfying or even unsatisfying. So that 1 in 5, again, just to be clear, really refers to the percentage that are very happy with the experience. But we believe that's the appropriate place to set the bar because, quite frankly, if the consumer isn't very happy with the experience, why would they pay more to buy from a brick-and-mortar store versus going online and getting it delivered either the next day or increasingly even same day? So I think certainly for retailers, the key question surrounds the purchasing experience. For many manufacturers, though, that experience after purchase, whether it's out of the box, unboxing, installing, setting up, using, any one of those things years into ownership can make the critical determination of whether the consumer is happy, refers, and repurchases or not. So depending on the industry, it can be any one of those.
I would only add to that in maybe the last 10 seconds that we have here too. I think there's a bigger idea to this too. I think it's been a relatively short period of time, in fact, that retailers have had to get used to the idea that what they really do sell is an experience, because ultimately in a world where we are one click or one touch away from just about anything on earth that we want and having it shipped to our door, the world really doesn't need what you sell. And it's a harsh reality, it's a harsh realization, but the world does not need what you sell. But what they do need is how you sell it and why you sell it. And so we need, as an industry, to put more energy and compassion and passion behind the selling of experiences and ideas rather than just moving products.
And for brands, then, delivery of experiences as well. So I would concur.
All right. Well, we've run out of time, and I don't want to keep anybody. I know a lot of people are doing this, while they're at the office and whatnot. So I want to remind everyone that we're going to be sending out an email that will have the link for the white paper to download, the rebroadcast of the webinar, as well as the slide deck itself. I want to thank again Dr. Hendricks, Mr. Stevens, Mr. Cardam for presenting. Thank you for everyone attending today. We appreciate your interest in Mize and smarter customer engagement. And I'd like to, if you need information any further from Mize or IMMR or Retail Profit or information on the book, the Retail Revival, please feel free to contact us, and we'll be happy to provide you that invitation and or information. Again, thanks to everyone to attending, and have a great day.
Thanks to all.